Women over 60, listen to me carefully because what I'm going to tell you will save you months or even years of wasted time with men who don't deserve your energy. Relationship therapists who specialize in mature dating have identified 5 specific phrases that are immediate red flags. Statements that reveal a man's character, intentions, and capacity for genuine partnership so clearly that the only appropriate response is to walk away immediately. Not after giving him another chance, not after trying to understand what he really meant, not after hoping he'll change or explaining why his words hurt you. Immediately. Because these 5 phrases tell you everything you need to know about whether this man is capable of the kind of respect, reciprocity, and emotional maturity that healthy partnership requires. At our age, we don't have time to waste on men who reveal through their own words that they're not ready for, interested in, or capable of real relationship. We've lived long enough to know that when someone shows you who they are through what they say, you should believe them the first time. The women who stay after hearing these phrases almost universally regret it. They describe months or years of frustration, disrespect, and emotional exhaustion that could have been avoided by simply walking away the moment these red flags appeared. Maya Angelou's wisdom applies perfectly here. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. The 5 phrases we're discussing today are men showing you exactly who they are, and your job is to believe them and act accordingly by walking away before you invest any more of your precious time and energy. If you've been making excuses for men who say disrespectful things, if you've been hoping that explaining your feelings will make them understand, if you've been wondering whether you're being too sensitive or too demanding, you're in the right place. This channel is dedicated to helping women recognize red flags early and protect their time and emotional energy. Consider subscribing if you want honest, direct advice about what actually deserves your attention in relationships. We're building a community of women who understand that walking away from what doesn't serve you is strength, not failure.
You're being too emotional, or you're overreacting. The first phrase that should make you walk away immediately is any version of "you're being too emotional," or "you're overreacting," or "you're too sensitive." This phrase is emotional manipulation disguised as observation. What he's actually doing is invalidating your legitimate feelings and making you doubt your own perception of reality so he doesn't have to take responsibility for his behavior or consider how his actions affect you. Relationship therapist Dr. John Gottman's research identifies contempt and defensiveness as 2 of the strongest predictors of relationship failure. When a man responds to your feelings with "you're overreacting," he's displaying both contempt for your emotional experience and defensiveness about examining his own behavior. Dorothy experienced this with a man she'd been seeing for 2 months. When she expressed hurt about him canceling plans last minute for the 3rd time, his response was immediate. "You're being too emotional about this. It's not that big a deal. You're overreacting." In that moment, Dorothy recognized the red flag for what it was and ended the relationship that week. "I'd been in a marriage where my feelings were constantly invalidated," Dorothy explained. "I recognized the pattern immediately. He wasn't interested in understanding how his behavior affected me. He wanted me to stop having inconvenient emotions that required him to be accountable. That's not partnership. That's manipulation." Clinical psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner writes about this tactic. When someone tells you you're being too emotional or overreacting, they're essentially saying your feelings don't matter as much as their comfort. They're refusing to engage with the substance of what you're expressing, and instead making the problem about your reaction rather than their action. Margaret heard this phrase from a man during their 4th date. She'd mentioned feeling uncomfortable with how much he'd been drinking, and his response was, "Wow, you're really sensitive. I wasn't even drunk. You're overreacting." Margaret ended the date and never saw him again. "I'm not too sensitive.
I have feelings and perceptions that are valid. A man who responds to my concerns by telling me I'm overreacting is telling me he has no interest in taking my perspective seriously. That's all I need to know. This phrase reveals several things simultaneously: that he doesn't respect your emotional experience, that he won't take responsibility for his behavior, that he'll use your feelings against you rather than working with you to address concerns, and that he sees emotional manipulation as an acceptable tool. None of these qualities belong in healthy partnership. The response? Don't defend yourself or try to prove your feelings are valid. Simply say, "We're not compatible," and end the interaction. His refusal to respect your emotional experience tells you everything you need to know. Walk away immediately.
Phrase number 2. I'm just being honest. After saying something cruel or disrespectful. The second phrase that warrants immediate departure is I'm just being honest, or I'm just telling it like it is, used as justification after saying something cruel, disrespectful, or unnecessarily hurtful. This phrase weaponizes honesty, using truth-telling as cover for cruelty while making you seem unreasonable if you object to being insulted. Relationship expert Esther Perel distinguishes between honesty that serves connection and honesty that serves ego. She says, there's a difference between saying difficult truths because they need to be said for the relationship's health and using honesty as permission to be cruel without consequences. The former is loving, the latter is abusive. Linda experienced this when a man she'd been seeing criticized her appearance harshly. You'd be more attractive if you lost some weight and did something different with your hair. And then, when she expressed hurt, responded with, "What? I'm just being honest. You asked if I liked your new haircut. I'm not going to lie to you." Linda recognized immediately this wasn't honesty in service of connection, it was cruelty disguised as virtue. She ended the relationship that evening. Actual honesty in healthy relationships is delivered with care and respect, Linda explained. It considers the other person's feelings while still being truthful. What he was doing was using honesty as an excuse to be cruel and then making me the problem for being hurt by his cruelty. That's manipulation, not honesty. Psychologist Dr. Susan Forward writes about this pattern. People who weaponize honesty are actually being dishonest. They're pretending their motivation is truth when it's actually about power and control. They want to say whatever they want without consequences, and "I'm just being honest" is their shield. Patricia heard this phrase after a man made an insulting comment about her ex-husband and her divorce. When she objected, he said dismissively, "I'm just being honest about what I see. If you can't handle honesty, we're not going to work." Patricia agreed. They weren't going to work, and ended things immediately. Men who hide behind "I'm just being honest" to justify cruelty are showing you they value their right to say whatever they want more than they value your feelings. That's not someone capable of partnership. That's someone who will use honesty to justify escalating disrespect. This phrase reveals that he believes his comfort in saying whatever he wants matters more than your legitimate hurt from cruel words, that he'll use virtuous-sounding justifications for disrespectful behavior, that he won't take accountability for how his words affect you, and that he sees disagreement with his behavior as your problem, rather than examining whether his behavior is appropriate. The response? You're right. We're not compatible. Goodbye. Don't argue about whether he was actually being honest or whether you're too sensitive to handle honesty. His use of honesty to justify cruelty tells you everything. Walk away immediately. Have you encountered men who weaponized honesty to justify cruelty? Share your experiences in the comments.
Phrase number 3. My ex-wife, girlfriend was crazy, with no acknowledgement of his own role. The third immediate red flag is when a man describes all his previous partners, especially his ex-wife, as crazy, psycho, impossible, or similar terms with zero acknowledgement of his own role in relationship failures. This phrase reveals that he takes no responsibility for relationship dynamics, that he sees himself as perpetual victim, and that he will eventually describe you the same way. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula notes, when someone describes all their exes as crazy, what they're really telling you is that they lack insight into relationship dynamics and their own contribution to problems. Healthy people can identify what went wrong in previous relationships and acknowledge their part in it. Helen went on several dates with a man who described his ex-wife as completely crazy and blamed her entirely for their divorce. When Helen gently asked what he'd learned about himself from the marriage ending, he looked confused. Nothing. It was all her. She was impossible. Helen ended things that week. I realized he had no capacity for self-reflection, Helen explained. If he couldn't acknowledge any role in a marriage ending after 30 years, he was never going to be accountable in a relationship with me. Eventually, I'd be the crazy ex-girlfriend he complained about to the next woman. Relationship therapist Terrence Real writes, taking responsibility for your part in relationship failures is a sign of emotional maturity. Blaming everything on your ex, without any self-examination, is a sign of someone who will repeat the same patterns because they can't see their own behavior. Ruth heard this from a man who described 3 previous relationships as complete failures due to the women being too needy, too demanding, or crazy. When Ruth asked what he might do differently in a new relationship based on what he'd learned, he had no answer, just more stories about how impossible his exes were. The pattern was obvious, Ruth said. If 3 different women were too needy, maybe the problem was that he was emotionally unavailable. But he couldn't see that. He was the victim in every story, which meant he learned nothing and would do the same things with me. Margaret experienced this when a man spent their entire first date complaining about his ex-wife. Every topic somehow circled back to what she'd done wrong, how difficult she'd made things, how he tried everything but she was impossible. Margaret didn't agree to a second date. A man who's still completely focused on how terrible his ex is, with no acknowledgement of his own contribution or what he learned, is emotionally stuck. He hasn't processed the relationship ending in any healthy way, and he's going to bring all that unexamined baggage into anything new. This phrase reveals that he lacks self-awareness and capacity for self-reflection, that he sees himself as victim rather than participant in relationship dynamics, that he hasn't done the emotional work to understand his patterns, and that he will eventually blame you the same way when things don't work out. The response: if a man describes all his exes as crazy with no acknowledgement of his own role, end the relationship immediately. You will become the next crazy ex he complains about. Walk away before you invest more time.
Phrase number 4. I don't want to put a label on this when you've been seeing each other for months. The fourth phrase that should make you walk away immediately is, I don't want to put a label on this, or I don't believe in labels, or why do we need to define what we are, when you've been seeing each other regularly for months and you're seeking clarity about whether you're in an exclusive relationship. Dating coach Matthew Hussey is clear about this. When someone doesn't want to label a relationship after months of regular dating, they're telling you they want the benefits of relationship, your time, attention, possibly intimacy, without the commitment or accountability that comes with actually being in a relationship. They want to keep their options open. Dorothy experienced this after 3 months of seeing someone exclusively, or so she thought. When she asked if they were in a relationship, his response was, I don't really believe in labels. Can't we just enjoy what we have without defining it? Dorothy ended that conversation. I'm 67 years old, Dorothy said. I don't have time for men who want to enjoy what we have without the clarity and commitment of actually being in a relationship. I don't want labels is code for I want to keep my options open and not be accountable to you. That's not what I'm looking for. Relationship expert Logan Uri explains, I don't want labels almost always means I want the benefits of relationship with you while maintaining the freedom to pursue other options. Very rarely does it mean anything else. If someone wanted to be in a committed relationship with you, they'd say so clearly. Linda heard this phrase after 4 months of regular dating. Dinners twice a week, weekend activities, meeting some of each other's friends. When she asked where things were going, he said, I don't think we need to define this. Let's just see where it goes naturally. Linda ended the relationship immediately. Let's just see where it goes after 4 months meant he wanted to continue having my time and company without committing to me or closing himself off to other possibilities. At our age, that's disrespectful. If you don't know after 4 months whether you want to be in a relationship with me, the answer is no. I'm not waiting around while you decide if something better comes along. Patricia experienced a variation. After 6 months of exclusive dating, she referred to the man as her boyfriend to a friend, and he corrected her. We never said we were boyfriend and girlfriend. We're just spending time together. Patricia ended things that week. If after 6 months you're uncomfortable with me calling you my boyfriend, you're not my boyfriend, and you don't want to be. You want the convenience of my company without the commitment of actually being in a relationship. I deserve better than that ambiguity. This phrase reveals that he wants relationship benefits without relationship commitment, that he's keeping his options open rather than choosing you, that he's not serious about building something real with you, and that he's comfortable with ambiguity that serves him at your expense. The response? I'm looking for a committed relationship, and it sounds like you're not. We're not compatible. Goodbye. Don't negotiate or try to convince him you're worth committing to. His unwillingness to commit after months together is your answer. Walk away immediately.
Phrase 5. You knew I was like this when we met. Justifying behavior that hurts you. The 5th phrase that warrants immediate departure is, you knew I was like this when we met, or I told you from the beginning I was like this, used to justify behavior that's hurting you or failing to meet basic relationship standards. This phrase essentially says, I warned you I wouldn't treat you well, so you have no right to expect better treatment or complain when I do exactly what I said I'd do. Psychologist Dr. Henry Cloud addresses this. When someone uses, you knew what you were getting, to justify behavior that's harming you or the relationship, they're essentially saying they have no intention of growing, changing, or meeting you halfway. They're telling you to accept mistreatment because they announced in advance they'd mistreat you. Helen dated a man who was consistently late and unreliable about plans. When she addressed it after the 4th time he'd left her waiting, he said dismissively, I told you on our first date I'm terrible with time. You knew this about me. Why are you surprised? Helen ended the relationship that conversation. He was essentially arguing that because he'd warned me he'd be disrespectful of my time, I had no right to expect him to actually show up when he said he would. That's absurd. Warning someone you're going to treat them poorly doesn't make poor treatment acceptable. It just means you're choosing to continue treating people poorly rather than working on it. Relationship therapist Terry Real writes, using "you knew I was like this" to justify behavior that hurts your partner is a refusal to grow. It's saying, I'd rather lose this relationship than examine or change this pattern. That's not someone capable of partnership. Margaret heard this from a man who regularly canceled plans last minute. When she expressed frustration, he said, I told you from the start I'm spontaneous and hate being tied down to plans. You knew this about me. Margaret ended things immediately. Being spontaneous doesn't give you permission to consistently disrespect my time by canceling plans we'd made. And using "you knew I was like this" to justify it means you have no intention of considering how your behavior affects me or making any adjustments. That's not partnership. That's asking me to accept poor treatment because you announced in advance you'd treat me poorly. Ruth experienced this with a man who was emotionally distant and rarely initiated contact. When she brought it up, he said, "I told you I'm not an emotional person and I need a lot of space. You knew this when we started dating." Ruth ended the relationship that week. There's a difference between having an independent nature and being emotionally unavailable. And using "you knew I was like this" to avoid any accountability for how your emotional distance affects your partner is manipulative. It's saying I refuse to meet you anywhere near the middle because I warned you I wouldn't. This phrase reveals that he has no intention of growth or adjustment even when his behavior hurts the relationship, that he values his comfort in staying exactly as he is more than he values your needs or the relationship's health, that he'll use early warnings as permanent justification for ongoing poor behavior, and that he sees your needs as unreasonable demands rather than legitimate requests for basic partnership. The response: "You're right. You told me who you were, and I should have believed you. This isn't working. Goodbye." Don't argue about whether his behavior is acceptable or try to explain why it hurts you. He's telling you he won't change. Believe him and walk away immediately.
Why walking away immediately matters. Understanding these 5 phrases is important, but understanding why you must walk away immediately, not after giving more chances or trying to explain, is equally crucial. Relationship experts who work with women over 60 consistently see the same pattern. Women who stay after hearing these phrases waste months or years hoping the man will change, only to eventually leave anyway after significant emotional exhaustion. Dorothy explained her decision to walk away immediately after hearing red flag phrases. "I wasted years in my marriage trying to explain to my husband why his dismissive behavior hurt me. He heard me. He just didn't care enough to change. Now, when I hear phrases that reveal a man won't respect my feelings, take accountability, or meet basic relationship standards, I walk away immediately. Not because I'm giving up easily, but because I'm respecting myself enough not to waste time on someone who's showing me clearly they're not capable of partnership." Clinical psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner writes about this. The fantasy that if you just explain your feelings clearly enough, he'll suddenly understand and change is what keeps women stuck in unfulfilling relationships. When someone shows you through their words that they're not interested in respecting your feelings or taking accountability, more explanation won't change that. It will just waste your time. The women who walk away immediately after hearing these phrases consistently report feeling empowered rather than defeated. They're not giving up on relationship, they're refusing to invest in relationships with men who've revealed they're not capable of genuine partnership. They're trusting what men tell them about who they are rather than hoping they'll become different people. The 5 phrases that should make you walk away immediately: "You're being too emotional," "I'm just being honest," after cruelty, "My ex-wife was crazy," with no self-reflection, "I don't want to put a label on this," after months, and "You knew I was like this," justifying hurtful behavior, all reveal men who are not capable of or interested in genuine partnership based on mutual respect, accountability, and emotional maturity. At 60 and beyond, you don't have time to waste hoping men will become different than they're showing you they are. When you hear these phrases, believe what they're telling you about character, capacity for relationship, and respect for you. Then walk away immediately, not after trying to explain, not after giving another chance, not after hoping they'll change. Immediately. Walking away from what doesn't serve you isn't giving up or being too demanding. It's self-respect. It's honoring your own worth enough not to waste your precious time and energy on men who've revealed through their own words that they don't deserve either. The right man won't say these things. The right man will respect your feelings, take accountability, acknowledge his role in past failures, commit clearly, and work on growth rather than justifying stagnation. If this conversation gave you clarity or courage to walk away from what doesn't serve you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and join our community of women who understand that self-respect means believing people when they show you who they are. We're having honest conversations here about protecting your time and energy.
Until next time, trust what people tell you about themselves, walk away immediately when they reveal they're not worthy of your investment, and remember that choosing yourself is always the right choice.